but I really appreciate you. I really do.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate your time. So we're just going to dive right into it. But just before we get started, I will be introducing my guest. She's not an ordinary guest. She is one of Springfield's most influential
Oh
women.
my gosh.
So she's not ordinary. So I have to read a profile. So I have to read Dami's profile tonight. So Dami Odwewu is the founder and CEO of Purpose Connect, an AI-powered immigration-aware job matching platform that bridges the gap between international students and U.S. employers. With a diverse background spanning healthcare, leadership development, and technology innovation, Dami has devoted her career to transforming how global talent connects with opportunity. Beyond Purpose Connect, she leads Dami LLC, a consulting firm specializing in career strategy, leadership development, and workplace culture transformation, and serves as founder of Divine Missions Health Center, a nonprofit expanding access to healthcare in undeserved. Is it? Oh, underserved, excuse me, in underserved communities across low and middle income countries. Dami works Dami's work lives at the intersection of technology, equity, and purpose, empowering people and organizations to thrive and create meaningful impact in the world. So please join me as I welcome Dami to Robin Minds with Kumbi.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me here tonight. So, as I said, we have already spent, more than enough time trying to figure out technology. So let's just dive right into it. So, Dami, when you hear self-awareness, what does it mean to you?
When I hear self-awareness, it's to me, self-awareness means being in tune with who God has created me to be, knowing who God has created me to be, and leaving that, leaving from that place of knowing.
Okay. So I like that you added God. You see,
Right.
I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't. Because if you ask, I believe anyone generally what self-awareness is, more than likely they would say it's just, connecting with yourself, knowing who
Yeah.
you are.
Knowing
But
who
I
you
like that.
are. And
Yes,
in my life, because God is, everything that I am flows from God, I see myself through the lens of who He's created me to be.
I like that. So that's on another level of self-awareness. No, seriously,
Yeah.
that's another level of self-awareness. So which means that your own self-awareness is really deep. It's not surface level.
Yeah.
Because now you're going into self-identity,
Yeah.
knowing who you are and whose you are.
Yeah.
So I like that you added, Christ into this because you truly know who you are.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
All
and for
right.
those who are not, necessarily Christians, or who practice other religions, I would say just really knowing at the core of self-awareness is really just knowing who you are, like outside of, I mean, there is the influence that your relationship with the Lord brings into who you
Brings to
are,
you.
but there are also other aspects of self-awareness that are specific to us and how we engage and interact with our environment. So that is another layer of it that doesn't often get talked about.
Okay. All right. Thank you for expanding on that. Okay, so now I would say, was there a moment in your life when you realized that you didn't really know yourself as much as you thought you did? And then what step did you take?
Yeah, I mean, many moments for sure.
Okay.
I think for me, the very first part of my self awareness, um, I'm gonna back up, right?
Okay.
As a child, and this aspect I'm gonna talk about has nothing to do with God. It just has everything to do with how I was interacting with my environment. So growing up, I was that child that just couldn't handle much, you know. I would get out into crowded places and like 15 minutes, I'm done. I'm exhausted. I don't want to, I don't want to hang around.
Socialize.
I will go to the market with my mom, and by 15 minutes, I look like I'm going to pass out, right? And until till today, as an adult, I still have, that is still a thing. Like if I go to the store, I still get overwhelmed. I still, but I didn't know my body enough to understand how can I actually stretch myself and withstand those environments longer, right? So that is one layer of self-awareness. I feel like, and in this instance, it's more environmental, right? In other instances, it's in interacting with people, dealing with people, who we are in relationships, who we are, as we navigate work and life and everything, right? If we are not aware of how our brains, our cognitive functions. I'm big on Myers-Briggs, um, personality test, right?
Mhm.
And it's because it really does help to come to that place of awareness of how are we engaging with our environments, what are our cognitive functions, where do we have natural like ability to deal with certain situations, and where is growth needed perhaps, right? And so for me, that was the first layer for me, was understanding what my cognitive functions were and what
Okay.
role they played in the way that I dealt with people and the way that I dealt with my environment, right?
Okay.
When I didn't really understand any of that, I would just, run away from things or places or people. I would avoid conflict. I would avoid, you know, different things just because I didn't have the awareness, which also then meant I didn't have the tools to navigate certain situations.
Okay. So what now brought you into that awareness? How did you
So
realize that?
so the
Uh,
first part of that was work. So the nature of my work started to shift. I needed to deal with more people. I needed to interact more with people. And once it was no longer okay that I had a very low capacity for people, right? So I had to start like really asking myself those questions. How can I bring my whole self into spaces, right?
and just to pause you real quick before you go far. So what work was that?
This was my work in nonprofit. So I had entered
And what
into
was your
the
role?
nonprofit industry doing development work, which is primarily fundraising, relationship building, getting out into the community. About, I think it was about 5 years ago, I had somebody had said to me, "You do so much great work. There's no reason more people should not, more people should not know about what you're doing." And my challenge with that was I didn't have the capacity to be out there dealing with more people. I was dealing with the
Okay.
people I had capacity to deal with,
To deal with.
but I also knew in order for me to grow in my work, in order for me to develop new relationships, I needed to work on that, right?
Okay.
So I began to really pay attention to myself and my body. I would go into, large crowds, and I started implementing strategies like, I get into large crowds, I'll periodically take my glasses off because it reduces the stimulation.
See.
Yeah.
Wow.
And now all of a sudden, I can quickly get my energy back, put my glasses back on, continue interacting with people. So I'm no longer getting real flushed. I'm no longer losing everything that I have in me. Like I was that person that people will come around and be like, Jamie, are you okay? Is everything okay? Because I would be so exhausted,
Mhm.
being out and engaging with people. Same thing if I was speaking to groups. And that was the other thing that came with nonprofit was I began to speak a whole lot more to large groups. I'm talking hundreds of people, and then I will get done and I will barely be making it after I'm done speaking, you know. And it wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but it wasn't effective for where I was trying to go.
Okay. And how did you know where you were going? So did you know that? Okay. Because we need to understand it. You said it wasn't effective for where you were going. How did you know where you were going?
My vision.
So,
So I knew I was, advancing in the nonprofit space. I knew I needed, at the time, I worked at a hospital. I worked, at the foundation of a hospital, and my role was very much tied to the community. I was doing a lot of speaking on behalf of the hospital. I was, in some instances, even representing the hospital on like, TV or radio, all of those things, right? But I also knew I was also that person on the team that my boss knew if we're having a golf tournament or we're having a gala or whatever it is, my boss knew Dammy will need her time to step away because she needs to, get the energy back. But it limited me because there are conversations that it literally takes one minute to miss out on connecting with somebody, right? And so I knew where I was, how I was looking to grow in the work that I was doing, but what it required was that I had a wider capacity for people. We would be at events and I would be looking for the closest table to go and hide under. You know what I'm saying? And
it's it's hard to connect it with who you are today
exactly,
and what you have achieved, it's
exactly.
really hard to connect it.
And that's the thing. People now would look at who I am today and they will say, "Oh my gosh, she's just got it all together." But the reality was it wasn't always that. I still don't have it together. What am I talking about? I'm still learning. I'm still, growing. I'm still asking myself those deep questions that really help me to come to tune with, who I am today and who I'm hoping to become tomorrow.
Amazing. Honestly, really, really amazing transformation from where you began to where you are today. So, from what you have shared, I can tell that self-awareness was responsible for part of your growth.
Yeah.
Even though I'm not sure that I really understand, the aspect of not being able to stay in a crowd for so long. You would need to like step away and then maybe come back again. I really don't understand that, but I don't want us to go too deep into that.
Yeah.
But would you say that for, I don't know, personally, I don't know if a lot of people, know what self-awareness is. So
Yeah.
would you say that it's like just knowing your likes and your dislikes, or do you think it's something deeper than that?
I mean, that is part of it, but that's like the surface level aspect of it, right? It's a lot deeper than that. It's values. It's the things that we value in life, right? Who I am, because I know so well who I am and who I am working to become, I'm able to determine who I bring into my space, right? And the other part of your initial question about at what point did I realize, right? I mean, I feel like there are multiple layers of self-awareness, right? And for me, another
Yes.
layer of that was relational. You're aware, or maybe, yeah, I hope. hope you are, aware that I did go through a divorce, right?
Yes.
I went
Yes.
through a divorce, and nothing brings you to a place of self awareness more than divorce would, you know. And I think for me, um, there were many things that I would rather avoid than confront, right?
Mm.
Instead of, you know, and then there were also aspects of um there were also aspects of, you know, being aware about who how I wanted people to like interact with me, right?
Okay.
And so I was that person who was, you know, one, I mentioned avoiding conflict. And I remember there was this day vividly, I was at work, and it wasn't just in the marriage, it was, I was at work. I had a coworker who was very much more like in your face type of person. And
Okay.
she got onto me about something. It was, I can't even remember. I think it was um somebody had passed that was a popular figure, and I didn't know, I wasn't aware who this guy was. And this coworker got upset that I didn't know who this person was. And she just went off on me, you know, because she was
What?
emotional about this popular
What?
figure passing. And so she just went off on me. And my immediate response was to run into my office and shut the door. I was like, get away from her as fast as possible. Right. And that was me in my marriage. I was the getaway, you know,
I
there's
don't want to talk about it.
chaos here. I'm gonna run away until this thing feels calm enough for me to come back into. Right? I didn't really know how to set the atmosphere because, you know, just because somebody isn't necessarily calm does not mean that I can't demand that, you know, that type of
From them.
but
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even know that I could demand it. Right? And so I would just flee. And so this coworker went off on me, and another coworker had to get onto her, literally in her face. You need to back off. She's literally not even responding to you, and she's like practically running from you, and you're still getting onto her. And what happened that day was I went back to my office, and it was like a light bulb moment. Like, why did it take somebody else defending me for me
Right.
to for you know, for the calm to happen? I could have defended myself. I could have demanded that atmosphere, right? And that's who I was in the marriage as well. I was that person who was like, I don't know how to do the whole like war situation. So when war is
Well, we're
declared,
trading words.
yeah, when war is declared, I'm
You
like,
just flee. Like,
I just crawl into like this whole like, it's almost as if all the processing happens in my head, but nothing comes out of my mouth, you
I
know.
see. I
And
see.
while for some people they're like, oh, that's good that you have the ability to not say something. Sometimes not saying something and not demanding the type of environment you want, that is immaturity at a different level, you know. And so I had to start learning what are healthy ways to start bringing my whole self into conversations no matter how difficult, right? I had to become aware of my own intentions because that's part of self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
I ask myself, what am I looking to accomplish from this difficulty, right? Am I looking for resolution? Am I looking to, you know, go from point A to point B, right? What am I hoping to do? Because in many ways, my avoidance was also preventing resolution,
Of course.
even though
Of
that was
course.
not my intent. Yeah. So those were the two things for me. It was, you know, work and what work required, and then, obviously going through divorce. And but I think divorce was the thing that like really really forced me to relearn about myself, identify the things that were not necessarily mature that I could work on,
Right.
and begin to engage with people from that place of now growing, right?
Okay. But would you say that now that you're aware that avoiding confrontation is like adding to the problem, you're just compounding the problem. You're not seeking a resolution by avoiding it.
Mm.
So would you say that you have grown from there?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Like I am very much I will have the conversation. I will have the conversation calmly, but I also set what awareness did for me was it also helped me to set the tone before the conflict happens, right?
Set the tone before the conflict
Set
happens.
the tone. So something and not to get churchy, but something my pastor talks about is every successful or every like growing relationship, whether it's work,
Right.
marriage, every one of those, they need to have rules of engagement. So in other words, when somebody is dealing with me, whether it's work or marriage, do they understand what the rules of engagements are? In other words, this is how conflict will be done. These are the, like the the known facts, right? Between two people. We're working towards the same goal. We're doing, you talk about all of those things, but also you establish in the event that we're not seeing eye to eye, how do we navigate that? What's going to be a productive strategy for navigating, situations where we're not in agreement, right? And I've seen this work, like most people who know me today, they already know like what strategy will not be productive, because I'm not just bringing myself to the space, but I'm
Right.
also vocal about like who I am and how I prefer to like navigate things. Like I'll tell people like you will get honesty from me. You'll get honesty with kindness. Like I'm not gonna, and like nobody ever gets yelled at and they walk away saying, ah, and that person was very, what they were saying was very sensible. No, all they remember is being yelled at. They're not
Sure.
gonna remember that the person had, made sense in the converse in their yelling. So I say that and I lead with that, but I set the rules of engagement in many of my like current relationships, whether it's work or relationship. I set the rules of engagement, and that I feel like has helped to mitigate any type of, you know, issues before before you even get there.
Okay, so speaking about the rules of engagement, so are these rules set prior to a conflict happening? Like, okay,
Yeah.
let's talk about maybe your colleague at work, a colleague at work. So, in order for you to avoid conflict with this colleague, or maybe with deal with a conflict effectively with this colleague. So are you saying that you're going to have rules of engagement with each person that you deal with? Or how do you set, rules of engagement? Is it something you just do non-verbally, or I'm trying to
So
understand it?
in a work setting, it's a lot harder to do it with each individual, right?
Yeah.
So in a
Mm-hmm.
work setting, what it's looked like for me, I, you know, I remember having another person that was actually difficult to deal with. And it was just, how would I put it? She had other things going on, but,
Okay.
she would bring those things into the work environment.
Workplace. Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know she had other things going on. It was just she would just lose it, and she would just go on complaining about stuff, right? And so, what rules of engagement look like for me in that situation was whenever we had a situation,
Okay.
and it was all noise, it was hard to communicate, it was hard to really, really get on the same page. I would say something like, okay, you know what? This is not productive. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to step away, and we'll give ourselves, time to kind of recoup, come back, and pick this back up,
Process.
right?
Yeah.
So I would very direct, I would say, this is what I feel like would be helpful for this conversation to be productive. I'll move away, come back, then have the conversation. And when I did that with this person, you
Mhm.
know, remember I said there were things from, outside work that were impacting who she was. Once I did that, she didn't really have any means of projecting anything anymore because I had removed myself.
Right.
And so her immediate reaction was she just bursted out in tears instead of, blurting out all the other stuff that were happening that was causing this behavior that we were seeing on the surface.
Right.
you know
Right.
and she starts talking about it, and I'm like, okay, so there's more to this situation, and now we can have a real conversation.
Conversation about the
Yeah,
real issue.
exactly.
Hmm.
Because the whole like noise was just the cover for what was really happening. And I would not have known that. I would just have engaged with all the noise, not catching that there was more. But once I removed myself and she didn't know what to do with all the noise anymore, she starts pulling out the real issue.
And I think it takes a self-aware person to be able to do that because when you're dealing with a colleague that has an outburst and you really kind of understand what warranted,
Yeah,
an outburst or a reaction,
yeah,
if you are self-aware, that would allow you to take a step back and even really try
yeah,
to understand, like, okay, is it the issue at hand that has caused this outburst, or this person is dealing with, some other things in our life?
yeah,
It takes a self-aware person to be able to do that. Otherwise, maybe it will just be like a commotion, you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
an argument between the two.
yeah. Like
And
I
I
didn't
think that's
know, I didn't even like I wasn't even thinking maybe there was other things. I think I just felt if I gave that space, it would give her room to like rethink her approach. That was like my own attempt, was just maybe she'll have time to sort of think about this instead of just reacting in the moment, right? So that's all I
yeah.
was trying to go for, but then I ended up, getting more out of the
Well,
separation.
very good approach. So, how would you say self-awareness has impacted, the people you bring into your life?
Mm,
Yeah, how would you say self-awareness has impacted that? Or how does it even impact, our relationships, the people we need to bring into our lives, the people we need to maybe not socialize with, the people in our caucus.
yeah,
So how would you say self-awareness impacts that?
for me, it helped me define what my values were. It helped me define what my values were. And I'll give an example. One of my topmost values when it comes to relationship is my no yelling policy. You know, no yelling.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, productivity doesn't come from yelling.
Yeah.
You're not going to get resolution from yelling. Yelling does the complete opposite of what I'm trying to work towards in a relationship, right? And so for me, I have to bring that to the forefront every time if I meet somebody and they're talking to me for the purpose of dating. That's one of the top things I bring up.
Wow.
I say Yelling is
It's a no
not
no.
not welcome. I don't believe that there's anything in relationship that cannot be discussed calmly. And I'm like, if we have, in fact, I had a relationship about what, 2 3 years ago, where
Okay.
we had a rule: if we're in disagreement, we're not seeing eye to eye, we're gonna give ourselves, whoever it is that's like fuming will get 2 hours to themselves. And after 2 hours we come back, and then
Yes.
we revisit the no, and it worked. It
It
actually
worked.
worked.
Okay.
It worked. We would get the 2 hours, and by the end of our 2 hours, because we had that rule of engagement before the issue came up, guess
Uh-huh.
what? We honor the 2 hours.
That's
We honor it, and then by 2 hours, one of us is coming to the other person, babe, our 2 hours is up. Can we,
Can we talk now?
and by that point you've
Yeah.
hopefully had time to really think through what
Rethink.
happened. And then there were instances where maybe 2 hours wasn't necessarily sufficient. I remember we had one time we had traveled, we were in Vegas, and we had a very like almost heated conversation, and it took the both of us going, wait, we're in Vegas to have fun, we're not in Vegas
To fight.
with all this stuff. So we decided, for the purpose of the trip, you know what, we're going to focus on having fun, and
Mhm.
then when we get back, we
We
can.
can continue with the
You
argument.
will not believe we didn't end up picking it back up for a month.
Good. Oh, but you still picked it back up.
Yeah, we did, but by then we had both had time to really like think about it, and by the time we came back together, we were more like willing to like you know come to the place of compromise on that topic.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, but then okay, I still want us to, dig further. So
Yeah.
I think that how self-awareness helps in, dictating who should be in our circle, as you said, is based on our values. And our values are like things like you said, no yelling is yours, is one of your no is one of your values.
I
I
mean,
would say maybe one of your
like
core
I said
values,
before.
right? Yeah, communication, integrity,
Hmm.
peace, name it.
Yeah.
So if when you know what your values are, I feel like it dictates the people that should be in your life. By the time you spend maybe just a little bit of time with anyone at all, you can tell who aligns with your values and who doesn't.
Hmm.
I think your values is a good way to select the people that should be in your circle, the people that should be in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you do not know your values when you're not fully self-aware.
Absolutely.
There's just no way. There's
Yeah.
no way you can know what your values are, like your real core values. I mean, you can have maybe 10, 20, 30 values, but some are core to
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you need to know what those core values are. If you don't know what those core values are, then you won't know who should be in your circle. You won't even understand why some people come
Right.
into your life and they can't stay in your life. It's because you're not in alignment
Yeah.
in values. When you're in alignment, you'll find that the people that stay, more than likely, the people that stay or the people that have stayed in your life are the people that align with you in values.
Yeah. Yep.
So it's a good way, as you mentioned, your values, are a good way for you to know who should be in your circle. Have you ever wondered why, you have some friends and you just cannot deal with them? It's just because you don't align. It's as simple as that. I tell people, you
Right.
can't be friends with everybody. You
Hmm.
can't be friends with everybody. You
Yeah.
select your friends based on your values. I
Yeah.
say your values are your makeup. That's what makes up, your identity.
Yeah.
Your values make up your identity. It makes up who you are.
Yeah.
Your values may be an offshoot of the word of God, maybe for those who are Christians. It can be an offshoot of your culture, experience, just different things. So you must know your values, very importantly,
Yeah.
before you can say you're self-aware. So it's not just, knowing your likes and dislikes. And as you said, that's just on the surface level. It's going deeper into, why do I do the things that I do?
Right.
Why do I act? Why do I react to things like, okay, just like you said, your deal breaker would be somebody that shouts. You just don't, it's just not something you can deal with. So I hope you understand why you cannot deal with that. I don't know, maybe you've had experiences in the past that made you say, you know what, this I just cannot deal with it. You know that there's a difference between just knowing that you don't like that thing and why is it that you do not like it? Why is it that you just cannot deal with it? I mean, I know I'm digressing, but please, I'm
Yeah.
just asking, I'm wondering, because I really want people to understand what being self aware is, what it means to be self aware, because it goes deeper than, okay, these are my likes. I don't like this. I don't like that. Okay, why don't you like it? I think self awareness answers the question of why. Why don't you like that thing? So I'm throwing it to you now. You don't like to be yelled at. I'm not saying
I mean,
anybody
I
likes it.
things. So I think it's two things.
Okay.
And I talked about the first part, which was you see what the result, the direct result of yelling is, right? And
Okay. Okay.
every experience where somebody was yelling at me there was no resolution.
I see.
You get what I'm saying?
Okay.
There was no
Okay.
resolution. So when you keep a record of the outcome of the behavior, you know this behavior is not positive. You know that this behavior is not helpful,
Good.
right?
Okay. Mhm.
And there was the other aspect of it, which, kind of ties in with my previous conversation about, just capacity for like chaotic stuff, you know, and like
Sorry.
me and somebody might have, um, uh, an altercation and all of that. And they would yell and yell and yell. And I would try to match up with them and they would walk away and they'll be fine. Nothing, there'll be nothing wrong with them. I will walk away and my chest will start hurting. You get what I'm saying? So I'm like, why would I engage in this thing or try to match up with this person when I know I'm going to have to deal with the consequences, whether it be my health or whatever it is,
That
right?
makes sense. Mm-hmm.
So that's the other part of it. But I think for me, the more like reflective part of it is seeing that it does not result in resolution.
Yeah.
So I mean, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again,
Expecting a different result. Yeah.
right? And why? I mean, if I'm dealing with someone, whether it's someone I'm working with or someone I'm in a relationship with, I want to the level that I can. I'm shooting for resolution. I want to work together with them. I'm on the same team with them. I want to continue to like, do this and not separating ourselves.
Okay. All right. Thank you for shedding more light on that. So let's move it away from relationship now. Let's talk about you for a little bit. I know recently you were named Springfield's one of the most influential women. Okay. So did you see it coming? This is somebody who barely could speak, maybe in public, and would need space, maybe within 10 minutes or 15 minutes of, being in a group or maybe being in public or addressing an audience. And then suddenly you're one of the most influential women in Springfield. So how did you do it? Tell us about your journey a little bit. How did you get here?
So I didn't see it coming. It was
Okay.
definitely a pleasant surprise. But I mentioned about 4 or 5 years ago, a friend of mine came to me and, said, I mean, you're doing so many great work. There's no reason people should not know about what you're doing, right? Because a lot of times we feel more comfortable kind of just doing the work. And like, I don't need to, get out there. I don't need to, people don't really need to know all the stuff I'm doing.
Right.
And this person said that day to me, and it stuck, as a challenge for me. It really got me thinking, how can I really start to build a brand for myself, right? How do I start working towards, you know, Dami becoming a brand of her own, so that
Okay.
people know this is who I am, and this is what I do, and this is, you know, what I stand for, and all of those things. And so I I I had to start setting goals. I'm very much a goals
Goal
person,
oriented.
even though it scared me because again, I had a low capacity, right? But
Mm-hmm.
I needed to start small.
Okay.
Yeah. And I remember even having conversations with friends, like, I know I need to get out more in the community. I know I need to do more. I just don't know if I can. But I started setting goals. One of the goals one of the initial goals I set for myself was, to just get to know people for no reason, like no agenda. I'm not meeting with them because I want to meet with them, to ask, to do business with them or whatever. I just want to meet with them to know who they are, get to know them. And so I had a goal. My goal was 3 coffee meetings every week. You know, I would go on 3 coffee meetings, no agenda, nothing. It was just, I would reach out to people and I'll say, "Hey, let's do coffee. Let's do, let's go have lunch." And I would do that, and my goal was 3 every week,
Wow.
you know. And at first it seemed like it was a stretch,
Mm-hmm.
but what ended up happening was, because I was reaching out to get to know people, people were also in turn getting to know me,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, that starts to turn into, whether it's any one of those people reaching out to me asking to come speak somewhere, or somebody
Okay.
asking, I would get calls, and it would be they need somebody to come speak about something, and somebody had mentioned my name just because they had the opportunity to sit over coffee with me and learn about what I'm doing, right? And
Yeah.
so that's really how that started to grow over time,
Okay.
to the point that I started exceeding the goals. And I started exceeding the goal.
You you really pushed yourself.
And it
You
also
did.
said in my personality, when I eventually went back to take the Myers-Briggs again,
Mhm.
I've crossed over from introversion slightly over to extrovert.
Wow. Okay.
You know what I'm saying? And this was, obviously this was like a 4 or 5 year period, but
Mhm.
I retook the test last year, and I've crossed over to extroversion.
So that means that our personality can change.
Oh yeah,
So
totally, totally.
okay.
And that
So
that was a pleasant surprise, because I was like what you would call an extreme introvert.
I will call you an introvert.
Oh, you would? Oh, you would?
Of course, I would.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I surprisingly now I have more room. I have more room. And that's the other thing, was self-awareness helped me to determine how to structure my week. I would
Okay.
have a lot of questions about, oh, how do you do so much? But what people don't realize is, if you ask me to do anything on Saturday, the answer is almost always going to be a no.
Why so?
Well, because I see people all week long,
Oh, I see.
right?
Okay.
So on
So you just want to
Saturday,
use your weekend to rest.
Saturday is the day I don't want to see anyone. I don't want to talk to anybody. You know, and I hold on to it. Like I'm very like strict with it,
Protective of your weekends.
because if I lose that Saturday, then I
Uh-huh.
to the week not having the amount of energy that I need
Okay.
for the week. You know, because Sunday is out of it. By the time you go to church, if I'm scheduled to do something, you know, two services,
Half of
you've
the day is gone.
used it all up. Right. And so Saturday is like the only day where I could replenish the energy. And
Okay.
so it for me it almost non-negotiable on Saturdays. Now come, you know, and then the other part of it was during the week. At one point I would go to the office every day. Now, Mondays and Fridays, I stay at home and I get more done. Right? I get more done. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I go into the office. I can take whatever distractions, I can go from meeting to meeting. You know, so I had to introduce structure in the way that I, you know, spent my time in order to maximize my energy the best.
Okay. I mean, and which is really important anyway. You have to, well, self-awareness is part of, knowing yourself, knowing that after you have seen people all week long, you need a day for yourself.
Yeah.
So that's part of self-awareness. Some people just, push it. They keep pushing it until they break down because they have not come to that realization of self and know when to stop. So
Yeah.
it's still part of self-awareness, knowing that, what, if I have given my entire week to, work and maybe meeting up with people, then weekend, I definitely need to, take a step back and, get some rest. So that's been smart. And that's what I call self-care.
Yeah.
Self-care, self-love, it's
Yeah.
everything, and it's part of self-awareness. All right, so we're going to move away from that now, and we'll go into the connection between self-awareness and purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Purpose, or you can call it calling. So what would you say is the connection? If you're not self-aware, do you think you can fulfill purpose? And in your own case, how did you know your purpose? How did you know your vision? Because, Dami, the reason why selected you for this particular topic is because at the time that I knew you, you were still very young, but you were such an intentional person. Even at that young age, you knew what you were doing, you knew what you wanted, you were so focused. And from what I remember, I believe you had started Divine Missions, or is it
Yeah.
Divine Missions or Divine Health
Yeah.
Missions? Exactly. You started at a very young age. So how did you find your calling? Would you say self-awareness is responsible for finding your calling early? Would you say it was Christ? Having Christ in your life helped you figure out yourself very quickly. I just want you to share so that others can learn, those still struggling with, who they are or what God has called them into. And how did you even know your vision? If you can just tie everything together.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny because I literally just talked about this yesterday at a church. And so we're gonna back up to 2003, 2004. I was a teenager. We had a family friend in Nigeria who needed blood. And they could, at this point, I was not, I hadn't accepted Christ. I was raised in church. But I was just that girl, just that good girl. I wasn't necessarily like a born again
But
Christian.
okay.
And so we had a family friend who had sickle cell anemia and needed blood. And, his mom leaves him at the hospital in search of money to pay for his blood transfusion. By the time she got back to the hospital, he had died. So this was my first, I would say this was the, you know, moment for me where the seed was sown. Because when the news got to us, I mean, at the time, I think I was like 14 or something. I just cried. You know, I didn't understand why, somebody would lose their life because their parent couldn't pay for their treatment. Now, that stuck with me. Now, fast forward to 2005 was when I accepted Christ, March 2005. Once I accepted Christ, I became, I had attended an event. It was Tag Change Agent, right? Shortly after I accepted Christ, I accepted Christ in March. I attended that event in April 2005. And I just remember walking away from that event, and I knew God had a purpose for me. I knew God had a purpose. I and I became, hungry to find out what it was. It was almost as if I became discontent with just getting through life, you know. And I started, it was like every chance I got, I was seeking the Lord for my purpose. Lord, what would you have me do on earth? Now, it's interesting because God is so intentional about us, right? He When I eventually got the vision for what would become my purpose, which was, reaching out to people and providing access to healthcare, to those who can't. That for me, that's where it all begins and ends. Like, you know, reaching out and providing access to healthcare, and watch God use that as a way to bring them, salvation. And so by the time that vision came in 2007, after praying, I mean, I prayed for almost 2 years. And then by the time the vision came, I remember just sitting in my living room back in Nigeria,
Yep.
2007, and it was just like a movie playing in front of me.
Wow. You saw a vision.
Really, it was like
Wow.
playing in front of me. I watched myself doing the work.
Wow.
And it was, it was a no-brainer, because I think God knew the impact that initial, when this family friend had died, God saw the impact of that on me, and how that
Hmm.
it stayed with me.
Right.
And so when the vision came, it wasn't, God cares about the things that we care about,
Of course.
right?
Yes.
So he
Totally.
took the thing that was a pain that I did not know how to fix, and then paired it with his own agenda, right? And that really was it for me. So by the time I came to the US, I came to the US 2008. By the time I came, I was already so clear on what I was working towards. Even though I didn't end up launching Divine Missions till 2014, everything I did was always with the reflection of, does it align with this vision that the Lord showed me?
Showed you. Okay.
And that was what led to me leaving Maryland to come to Springfield.
Mm. I see.
You
I
know, that
see.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was in Maryland, and for a while there was so many distractions. I wasn't really like diving into the work. And then eventually I realized, if this was gonna happen, I needed to come, I needed to get out of what I knew. And everybody thought I was crazy in Maryland. Why are you going to Springfield, Missouri? What part of
I,
the
I,
country,
I was surprised too. Like,
what part of the country is that?
uh-huh.
And I came to
Uh-huh.
Springfield and literally founded my Divine Missions within 6 months of coming to Springfield. Came to Springfield July 2013, started Divine Missions January 2014, Our first missions trip was August 2014. You know, and so that's really for me. And that's the other thing is, obviously, when you introduced me as, oh, I, founded Purpose Connect and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
For me, once I discovered, what my purpose was, and I started to walk in it, I remember just graduating. Purpose Connect resulted from me graduating and entering into the workforce. I took a job at the hospital as a manager. And one day I was just like, because I'm going to work and I have so much fulfillment, right? Doing what I was doing. And it was because I knew I was walking in my purpose, right? Because you show up differently when you're walking in your purpose.
Of course, of
You
course.
you work as a team differently when you're walking in your purpose.
Yeah,
Treat people differently when you're walking in your purpose. You know, a lot of the petty things that happen in the workplace,
yeah.
you have no energy for it because your mind is so focused on the stuff that matters.
What you have been called to do.
Right. And
Yeah.
so I remember I would just look and it was almost as if people didn't want to be at work. you know and I'm like, what's the deal? Because me, I want to be at work. I'm happy to be here. What is going on? And that was what led to creating Dami, helping people discover their own purpose. And then Dami then led to discovering the problem with that Purpose Connect now created. So
Okay.
I do, whether it's Dami, Purpose Connect, neither one of those would have existed if I didn't discover my purpose.
Right. Okay. But you still have divine missions, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So let's stay with divine missions very quickly. And I want us to round up, in the next 5 minutes if possible. So I think one thing that I would say still stands out for me about divine missions, I remember in 2020,
Yeah.
divine missions went to Nigeria during the pandemic.
Oh no,
Honestly,
Ebola 2014.
it, it I know it was a crazy time. Honestly, I thought you were crazy. I really thought you were crazy. I said, who goes to Nigeria at this time? It's not even about Nigeria, it's about the pandemic
Yeah.
going on at the time. And I think it was at that point I knew God had called you into this because there was no way you will do that without having the backing of God. How can you go to a place where there was a pandemic?
Yeah.
You went, you did not go alone, you went with doctors, well, let's just say medical practitioners, and everybody came back. There was no issue whatsoever. Wow,
I,
that
s-
was
I still told somebody yesterday. So I mentioned I went to speak at a church about medical missions. And it was a lady who came up and, I can't even remember how we got on the conversation, but I said to her, I said, when you do the kind of work that missionaries do, you can either, there are people who spend their time worried about what could go wrong, right? And that's not, I think God he wires us all differently, right? I am that person that I know God's either going to protect me, or if anything happens and I lose my life, I know I lost it still doing what God called.
save others. Mm.
You know what I'm saying? And my mom, she gets upset every time I say that. But I tell her,
Which mother wants to hear that? Like, are you serious? You lose your life I mean, you lose your life for others.
well,
No parents wants to hear that.
but within the context of the kingdom and what God is doing on earth, right? If what it requires is that somebody loses, which is essentially even what the military does, they go to places and they don't know if they're going to come back, right? In
That's
order
true.
for a person to serve, I don't think
Their country. Mm-hmm.
serve the Lord if you are not, if you have not made your peace with that potential outcome. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, of course.
With that,
Yes,
you can't, you know. And
that's true.
that and
That's true.
that's what it was for me when Ebola happened. I
Mm-hmm.
literally I remember telling whoever called me to caution me. I said,
Mm-hmm.
you know, God
Are you okay?
God has gone ahead of me. If anything happens to me, then we know that God is done using me.
Mm.
You know, until then, anywhere He sends me, I'm going. You know, and my mom was upset. Everybody was, they were losing their minds.
Of course. Of
Of course,
course.
my mom
That's
was,
the natural response from a parent. Like, what are you doing? What are you thinking?
but I think now she's now learned, because I
Okay.
still tell her till today, you know,
And you'll do it again,
or
I
whatever
guess.
tomorrow comes and, something happened to me,
Yeah.
I want to make sure that when I have to answer to God, my reason for not yielding to His directions, His instructions, was not other things. And she will look at me, she'll say, oh, that everything is not about God. I said, Mom, everything is about God. you know all
Oh, Lord.
about God. And so I think that purpose, a person doesn't, you can't fully get grounded in your purpose if you have not fully come into like knowledge of who you are, your
Yeah.
identity, right? And I think for me, once I came into my identity, and that's the other reason, even things like, you know divorce or any other major life issue is not strong enough to knock me out of my
You're
purpose,
calling. Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Even though the enemy will try to challenge us,
Of
right?
course.
When I went through my divorce for a few months there, I was like, maybe I'm no longer qualified to be in this ministry, right? And then God has to now start working through that, working through us. But the thing that really guarantees that we're gonna be fine and we're gonna get back on track is if we're still staying connected to our identity,
Of course.
to who has called us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I really needed to just applaud you for that because it still blows my mind till date. Like I don't know how Dami just did it at a time where it was there was a pandemic like Ebola,
Yeah.
not even COVID, Ebola.
I mean, we still hear it even today. Like every time we're gonna go to Cuba again in March. We'll come
Okay,
back to Honduras in July. We still, every time
nice,
somebody's
nice.
us, oh, you guys, we've had people that their parents cautioned them. In fact, I have a very close friend of mine. Her mom was so uncomfortable when she eventually, you know she wanted to like really give her mom peace of mind. She dragged her mom with her, dragged her mom,
Good idea.
yes, because now her mom gets to experience the impact. She gets to experience, because every time I go on a mission trip,
Right.
it's almost as if I go through a reintroduction to like God's calling for my life. And all of a sudden I'm like humbled all over again, that God will do what He does, through me.
Hmm.
There's no way anybody goes on a mission trip and then you come back and you are just content. No,
You
you're
can't
gonna
be.
want
You
you
definitely
want
want more.
yeah, you're gonna want more. And that was what
Mm.
happened to my friend's mom. She was like, She went from
Aha.
skeptic to convert.
Have you ever taken your mom on any of those trips?
Oh no, I have
Not
not.
yet. You
No,
should.
she'll tell me she's too old for it.
Aw.
Yeah, she'll remind me she's in her late 70s and she's too old.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well,
Yeah. And then
that's
my
true.
and then Toba stays with her when I go.
When you go, I see. Okay, so how can people connect with you to either support you in what you do or just connect with you? Like, how do we connect with DAMI, LLC, Purpose Connect, and Divine Missions as we round up?
So Dami LLC has all the information. So if people go to damicc.us, and the email for that is dami@damicc.us, they'll be able to see the details, whether it's Divine Missions, Purpose Connect, it's all on there.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Dami, for your time. Thank you for an insightful session. Thank you for, giving us practical insights into self-awareness and how it impacts growth. And to our viewers, thank you for watching. We appreciate you. If this blessed you in any way, please share, like, comment, and then we will come your way again next week for another episode of Robbie Minds with Kumbi. Again, I'm your host, Adekumbi Lowry. Until we meet next time, next week, Monday, keep learning, keep growing, and bye for now.
Bye bye.